But you know, I only found out I was the first British woman to motorcycle around the world in about 2009. I started riding bikes when I was 17. I had a Yamaha YB100, which I bought, which was simply a mode of transport to get around London. I'd been expelled from school, and so I was in London at home, and I had to get to a college to finish off my A-levels, and so it was just a quick, easy way of getting around town. I mean, I didn't at the time see myself as becoming any great motorcyclist or anything. It was literally just a cheap, efficient way of getting around London. So I had that and in those days you could just kind of ride a bike without taking a test or anything. You could just go, put L plates on it, practice up and down your street, and then off you went onto the street. So, and after about a year of the Yamaha, I then bought myself a 250 because I found the 100cc was a bit limiting. So I bought a 250, Honda 250, and I had that for about a year. And then I got a little bit bored of that, and then I bought my BMW 600. And it was actually the BMW that I really suddenly realised the sort of travelling potential of a motorbike. And it sort of gave me just an amazing sense of freedom. I felt I could go anywhere and, you know, get anywhere, do it. It was brilliant. So I did a trip up. My first trip was a trip up to Scotland on my own, and then I went around Ireland, and then I went around Europe the following summer, and then the following year I flew out to Los Angeles, and I bought a BMW 750, an old 750. 1973, and rode it across from Los Angeles to the East Coast, and then sold it. And it was actually when I was riding across America, I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if I could actually ride around the world? But it was kind of like this sort of stupid thought that, you know how you kind of think about things, but you just never imagine you'd ever do it. But it was on that, journey when I was riding across America. I thought, wouldn't it be absolutely amazing if I could actually ride my bike around the world? But I never thought I'd do it. Just commuting. It was simply to get around London cheaply and efficiently. That was it. I had finished my first 3 years, I'd just finished my first 3 years architecture, so I was basically a student. The reason I left, it was, so basically I said I'd had this sort of thought in my mind to ride around the world the year before, and on my final year doing architecture, I'd been going out with this bloke at the time, and I was very much in love with him, and he sort of finished our relationship about 3 months before my finals. So I found it really difficult to work. So as a consequence, I did really badly in my finals. So in the kind of May, June of that year, I was still feeling pretty miserable about the breakup of my relationship, and I had a lousy degree. And I was questioning whether I should carry on doing architecture, because architecture is like a 7-year course. So I was questioning whether I should do architecture or not. So actually, I thought, I just need to get away. And so I thought, I think I'll go and ride my bike around the world. And that was it, really. So then I worked in a pub, saved some money, saved £2,500, and just left with £2,500, and I started off in America because that was where I'd travelled the year before, and so I felt confident I could kind of do that as kind of stage one, because it was a known, it was a known quantity to me. So so I shipped my bike to New York, and that's where I started. It was probably more a financial thing, to be honest, and I suppose, and I started riding bikes before I started driving cars. I had my bike licence 3 or 4 years before I had my car licence, and I think that was probably just a practical, in those days, trying to get around London. I mean, the bike was the perfect perfect mode of transport. And I mean, it really was just the best way to get around London. And also I couldn't afford a car. I couldn't park a car anywhere. It was more on a sort of practical level. I started off riding bikes, and I suppose it was just in my mind to ride a bike. It was, and I think a bike just gives you a whole kind of real sense of freedom, and whereas I don't really ever feel that in a car. You're all kind of, you know, boxed in and contained, and you're not really part of what's going on around you. Whereas on a motorbike, you're very much living and breathing what you're going, you know, the countries that you're travelling through and what you're experiencing. Well, interesting. When I got to New York, I organised, I think I managed to organise insurance for like New York State, but in America it was really difficult because every state has their own different insurance thing. So I think I managed to get some kind of insurance, pretty basic insurance, going across America. When I was in Australia, again, I managed to get some pretty basic bike insurance. But after that, and I think in Malaysia I managed to get some insurance, but after that I didn't bother. I mean, I kind of realised that when you're in certain countries like, you know, Thailand or India or Pakistan, if you have an accident, if you knock some guy off his bicycle or something, there's no point waving some piece of paper in front of him that's written in a language he doesn't understand. I mean, it's a complete waste of time. All they want is money now, and that's it. And everything is dealt at a very different level, and the whole thing of insurance was just irrelevant. So literally from the Far East home, I had no insurance at all, absolutely none. Well, if somebody could have given me insurance at the time, but I tell you, in 1983, if you'd phoned up any bike insurance companies and can you insure me to ride my bike around the world, they would have laughed at you. It wasn't a conscious decision to go on my own. It wasn't sort of, I'm going to do it all by myself or anything like that. It was just, I just knew I wanted to ride my bike around the world, and there wasn't anybody who I could find to go with me. So it wasn't really I'm going to do this by myself at all. It was just I wanted to do it, and there was nobody. You know, in those days, people, you know, very few people kind of did trips like that and went off, and there were, you know, I just couldn't really interest anybody. And also, I think travelling with somebody, you know, to leave with somebody on a trip like that, you'd have to know the person pretty well, and how long you'd actually last travelling together, I don't know really. Well, it was a bit odd really. My mum kind of did everything she could to try and stop me. And it wasn't, you know, she'd always, you know, both my parents had given us loads of freedom as we were growing up. It was it was a very happy family upbringing. It wasn't, but she was obviously incredibly worried about me venturing off on my own around the world, and she hated motorbikes. She was a doctor. Well, both my parents were doctors. And so they obviously did their stint in A&E when they were doing their training and saw all these injured motorcyclists coming in. So my mum hated motorbikes, absolutely hated them with a vengeance. And I think she kind of saw my whole sort of thing with a motorbike as a little sort of blip in my life. And I managed to grow out of it. So she did everything she could to try and stop me from going. And I think after I left, she, in a way, almost pretended I wasn't doing it, because I think that was just her way of sort of dealing with it. It's not really happening, because she couldn't. I think it's very difficult as a mum, you know, as a mother, and seeing your daughter. And as I say, now it's different. A lot more women, you know, go out and travel alone and ride motorbikes. But 40 years ago, it kind of didn't, or 35 years ago rather, it didn't really do it. My dad was very eccentric. He was a sort of psychiatrist, and I don't know, he just didn't really say anything. It was a bit odd. My friends, I think most of my friends probably thought I was going to be back in about 3 months' time. I don't think any of them actually thought I'd ever do it. I don't know really, I kind of tried not to pay too much attention to it really, because I had so many people giving me so many negative reasons why not to do it, and you'll never do it, and it can't be done, and I just didn't want to listen to it all, you know. So I just kind of, you know. No idea. I was the first woman, or first British woman I should say, to ride around the world on a motorbike. It was only in about 2009 that I actually found that out. But the whole thing of who did it first is a very complicated subject, which I don't really want to get into. The bike I chose to ride around the world, well, I didn't actually choose it to ride around the world, but the bike I rode around the world on was a BMW R60/6, so it was 600cc. It was 1974, so it was quite old. It was already 8 years old when I left on my trip, and she already had 45,000 miles on her when I started out. So she was quite old when I began my journey. She didn't really have a name, but I used to talk to her all the time. I used to call her old girl. I don't know why, but I never had a name for her. I just used to, but I did talk to her a lot. She was my companion for 2 years. I paid £900 for her in 1979, which actually was quite a lot of money for an old bike, but I kind of knew I wanted a BMW. I don't know why. I just kind of knew that they were reliable, they were well made, they were solid, and I just kind of wanted one, and I don't know where that came from. I just did. I did all the prep on my bike. I bought myself a Haynes manual, and I basically taught myself. So I stripped stripped the cylinders down, and I decided before I left that I would do as much as prep my bike the best I could. So I replaced all the gaskets, all the seals, all the cables, put a new battery, new tyres, obviously changed all the oils. I mean, I did everything that I could think of to minimise the things going wrong before I left, and also it was a good way to learn about my bike. Well, I mean, I had absolutely no idea really. I knew, but because I'd ridden across America the year before, I had a kind of fairly good idea how much my petrol costs were going to be. I could sort of calculate how long I thought it was going to take me, how much my accommodation. So I could do which is why I started in America, because it was a sort of known quantity. So I worked in this pub for 3.5 months, and I saved £2,500, and that's what I left with. And I knew it wasn't enough to get me around the world, but I hoped it would be enough to get me to New Zealand or Australia, where I could then work again and replenish my funds to carry on. But I just knew if you work and you work and you work until you think you've got all the money. But also in those days it was very hard to carry money. I mean, you couldn't, I mean, all my money was in traveller's checks that I had kind of strapped around my waist. So I didn't really want to have, you know, £6,000-7,000 strapped to me, carrying it around all the time. So in some ways it was better to just sort of do it in stages. And also I didn't know whether I was going to be back in 3 months either, to be quite honest. But I just knew I had to leave, and just leave with what I had, and then I'd just deal with it as and when I ran out of money. I didn't really take any luxury items. I mean, my tools, obviously I took all my tools and all my spare parts from my bike, and just basic clothes. I took a tent, sleeping bag, just basic clothes, and my tools for my bike. That was it. literally just, well, when I got to New York, you kind of head west, and I decided first to go up into Canada to see the falls at Niagara, so that was kind of stage one. And then because I left in October, it was quite cold in the northern states, so I thought, right, now I'll head south. So from there I rode straight down to New Orleans, where it was much warmer. I mean, I was affected very much by the climate, actually. I kind of tried to follow the sun and follow the heat. So then I got to New Orleans, and I rode through all the southern states across to Los Angeles.